The Bear and the Bee. Once upon a time, in a small village, there lived a bear named Benny. Benny loved eating honey all the time. One day, Benny looks in his cupboard and he can't find any honey. Oh no! No honey? He says. So he goes to the forest to find some honey and he sees a beehive in a tree. He smells the honey. Honey! He sticks his paw into the beehive and bee flies out. Hey bear, go away! This is not your honey, says the bee. Benny was annoyed. I'm bigger and stronger than you. I can do what I want. Now buzz off, says the Benny. Benny sticks his paw into the beehive again and the bee stings him right on his nose. My nose! My nose! I'm so angry, growled the Benny. He finds a big stick and tries to hit the bee, but the bee is too fast. Benny gets angrier and angrier. I will squash you. Come here. The bee flies back into the beehive. Now you're trapped, yelled Benny. He swings his stick at the beehive. Smash, smash, smash. He smashes it into pieces. Then he hears a strange sound and it gets louder and louder and louder. Zzz, zzz. Thousands of bees fly out of the smashed beehive. They fly around Benny's head. Zzz, zzz. They sting him all over his body. Benny runs all the way home and he never bothers the bees again. The Tiger and the Bear Story. A long time ago, there was a tiger and a bear that lived together in a forest. They dreamed of becoming humans, and one day they met a spirit who had come from the sky and lived in the forest. They talked to the spirit and asked it how they could become human. The spirit listened and told them they must eat a special mixture of garlic and mugwort and live inside of a cave without any sunlight for 100 days. Then they could become human. Without hesitating, they took the mixture and ran into a deep cave nearby. Each day, they ate the food and waited in the darkness. The food was so bitter and the cave was cold and boring. The tiger complained a lot, and after 20 days, it gave up and left. I can't take it anymore. I quit. The bear was left alone in the cave and felt lonely. However, the bear silently persevered. Time went on and on. Eventually, 99 days passed. On the morning of the 100th day, a bright light shined through the darkness and wrapped the bear in its warm glow. The bear disappeared into the light, and what appeared in its place was a beautiful lady. The lady emerged from the cave and lived happily ever after. The moral of the story is we all want to become a true person and live happily forever, just like the bear who followed the method given by the spirit and become human. When you follow the method and throw away your mind, which is not real, only truth and happiness remains. And if you are patient, give it enough time, and are grateful, you can also make it to the end. Kids, or you want to be like the tiger or the bear? The end. Mother for Choco. Choco was a little bird who lived all alone. He wished he had a mother, but who could his mother be? One day, he set off to find her. First, Choco met Mrs. Giraffe. Oh, Mrs. Giraffe, he cried. You are yellow just like me. Are you my mother? I am sorry, sighed Mrs. Giraffe, but I don't have wings like you. Next, Choco met Mrs. Penguin. Oh, Mrs. Penguin, he cried. You have wings just like me. Are you my mother? I am sorry, sighed Penguin, but I don't have big round cheeks like you. Next, Choco met Mrs. Walrus. Oh, Mrs. Walrus, he cried. You have big round cheeks just like me. Are you my mother? Now look, grumped Mrs. Walrus. I don't have striped feet like you, so don't bother me. No matter where Choco searched, he couldn't find a mother who looked just like him. When Choco saw Mrs. Bear picking apples, he knew she couldn't be his mother. Mrs. Bear didn't look him at all. Choco was so sad, he started to cry. Mommy, Mommy, I need a mommy. Mrs. Bear came running to see what was the matter. As she listened to Choco's story, she sighed. Oh dear, if you had a mommy, what would she do? Oh, I'm sure she would hold me, sobbed Choco. Like this? Asked Mrs. Bear, and she held Choco very tight. Yes, and I'm sure she would kiss me too, said Choco. Like this? Asked Mrs. Bear, and she lifted Choco and gave him a big kiss. Yes, and I'm sure she would sing and dance with me to cheer up, said Choco. Like this? Asked Mrs. Bear, and they sang and danced together. When they stopped to rest, Mrs. Bear turned to Choco and said, Choco, maybe I could be your mother? You? Choco cried. But you are yellow and you don't have wings or big round cheeks or stripped feet like me. My goodness, said Mrs. Bear. That would make me look very funny. Choco thought it was funny too. Well, said Mrs. Bear, my other children are waiting for me at home. Why don't you join us for apple pie, Choco? Apple pie sounded wonderful to Choco, so off they went. When they arrived, Mrs. Bear's other children rushed out to greet her. Choco, said Mrs. Bear, meet Hippie, Ally, and Piggy. I'm their mother too. The sweet smell of the apple pie and the sound of laughter soon filled Mrs. Bear's home. After the delicious treat, Mrs. Bear gave all the children a big warm bear hug. And Choco was very happy that his new mommy looked just the way she did. The end.